Good afternoon. I'm Jim Townsend, Director of the Levin Center for Oversight and Democracy at Wayne State University Law School. To celebrate Black History Month, the Levin Center invited Congressman Bennie Thompson of Mississippi to have a conversation about his long and distinguished career serving the people of Mississippi and our nation, and his experience as an African-American growing up in the South, coming of age at a time when Black people were denied voting rights and other basic civil rights, and rising to become one of the most prominent leaders ever to come from the state of Mississippi. Congressman Thompson has represented the 2nd District of Mississippi since 1993. He received his bachelor's degree from Tougaloo College in 1968 and his master's from Jackson State University in 1972. And prior to coming to Congress, he taught school. He served as an alderman and then mayor of Bolton, Mississippi, his hometown, and then as a Hinds County supervisor. Chairman Thompson became a household name when he was chosen to lead the Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Congressman Thompson, welcome. I am so honored to have this opportunity to chat with you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, I thought we would kick things off just by having you just tell me a little bit about your hometown, about Bolton, Mississippi, and how it shaped you.
Well, you have to understand rural America. Most people take a lot of things for granted in this great country, running water, streets, police safety, those kind of things. But I grew up in a small community of 500 people, Bolton. But like most communities in the South, I was on the other side of the track, so that a lot of the things that people took for granted, we didn't have in the area that I went. My school was named Bolton Colored School. There were 2 schools in a little town of 500 people, one for the black kids and one for the white kids. Big difference. The white school was brick. The black school was wood. We didn't have a cafeteria, a gymnasium, a library, or anything like that, but the white school did. And so, but that was pretty much the South at that time. One of the comments I make is I never had a new textbook my whole public school career. They were always the books passed from the white school to the black school. And so the focal point became my church, my little community baseball team, and the fact that everybody wanted to get an education because that was viewed as the way out of that situation. Mm-hmm. So I still live there. I'm a block from the house where I was born. A lot of my friends are still there. We hunt, we fish, we interact with our children and grandchildren, and some of us are fortunate to have them in that little community too. And one of the stories I tell is that I know everybody's business in Bolton, but they know mine too, because there are no secrets. And so it's where you speak to everybody there, and but one of the things over that time that you learn is you count the sum total of your experiences. And your behavior. Absolutely. People remember. Absolutely. And so part of what Bennie Thompson grew up with later in life was never wanting the kids of Bolton to experience those things that he experienced. And so the best way to do it after teaching school a couple of years was to get involved in politics, to change public policy. And so ultimately, those 2 schools in Bolton became one. And so all the kids in Bolton went to a brand new school. But unfortunately, the white kids their parents chose to send them to a segregated academy that didn't allow black kids to go to. But the public school, V.L. Rubin Junior High, named after one of the first black principals in the area, who actually, before Bolton Colored School, they had to go to school in the church because there were no schools for black kids at that time. So part of what I try to do on a daily basis is make a difference and accept the principle that we should never go back to what some people used to try to say, the good old days. You know,
They weren't so good in some respects.
no, they absolutely weren't.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people in my community, the way out was to go north, Chicago, Detroit, Gary, you know, the automotive industry, the steel mill industry.
Right.
And so they did. But in my high school graduating class, only a few of us stayed around to go to school. And in college, even fewer stayed around. My first public school contract was $2,600 a year. And the men in 1968 made more money than the women. And so it was both a racial disparity and a gender disparity in education. But it was difficult, but you know, as the song says, somehow you made it.
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, I wanted to talk with you about your career and about how you've approached particularly oversight and trying to make government transparent and accountable. But before we, you know, leave sort of your early life, I know your father passed away when you were 15.
Yeah,
And he never got the chance to vote
that's right.
in his entire life.
Right. 15, I was 10th grade. And at that time in 1963, it was pretty much illegal for a person of color in Mississippi to register and vote without some fear of harassment or intimidation. So he didn't register and vote. And so, but one of the other things is my mother actually had to teach him how to sign his name because he was not able to have a formal education because in his community, the boys went to the field
And didn't go to school.
And didn't go to school.
Yeah.
So, but Mama worked with him and got that to a point where, you know, functionally things could happen. But the challenge for me all that time, and I'll kind of fast forward, at Tougaloo College, which was the hotbed of the civil rights movement in terms of a historically black
college, and then you went on to Jackson State, another historically black
that's
institution.
Right.
Yeah.
But I met Martin Luther King Jr., I met Harry Belafonte, Dick Gregory, every major civil rights person who would come to the South could come to Tougaloo's campus because it was a private college and the police didn't have any authority to break up the meetings or that kind of thing.
And you were involved with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee?
I was involved with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was like what all the youngsters my age at that point, where we gravitated to. Stokely Carmichael, Rap Brown, just everybody came through because Tougaloo gave them that exposure. But I also worked on a congressional campaign for a lady in the Mississippi Delta named Fannie Lou Hamer. Well, Miss Hamer had been on campus, and you know, she's that person who coined the phrase, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired."
Right.
And so I came home one weekend after doing voter registration in the Mississippi Delta, and I was telling my mama how fulfilled I felt at going up there helping the poor people in the Delta to register to vote. And she said, you know, people in Bolton who are colored don't vote either. I mean, you know, it's like, whoa, something's wrong with this picture.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, why should I go 120 miles to Ruleville, Mississippi?
You got work to do right at home.
Right at home.
Yeah.
Which was one of the things that, in addition to just being the only child left in Mississippi with a mother, was the draw to make a difference in my community.
Mm-hmm.
So, made the decision to stay, got involved actively in creating voter registration and those kind of opportunities, working with the various groups. And then we started looking for somebody to run for office. And, you know, they kept saying, well, you ought to do this. Whoa, I'm the youngest guy at the meeting. At that time, I was still 20.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, we'll let 2 other people run for the council if you'll be the 3rd one. So we were fortunate.
And all 3 of you got elected?
All 3 of us got elected.
So I want to ask you about that experience, but while we're talking about voting and voter registration and what you learned as a student, as an activist trying to register voters, you know, we know that this is going on now, that there are people who want to restrict access to the ballot. They want to demoralize people.
Yeah.
And so I have a question for you, which is, how did you then, and what do you think now about trying to get people engaged and keep them engaged between elections so that they will feel like their vote matters?
That's right.
Have you learned some things about how we can do that? And
oh,
what
absolutely.
do you think?
There's no substitute for public engagement. There's no substitute for public debate. Right. It's only when people try to convince you of their thoughts without giving you an opportunity to hear yours, do we have a problem? And so part of that community organizing side of Bennie Thompson is say, first of all, you listen to people, you hear what they have to say, you hear the good, the bad, the ugly, and then you see whether or not there's a public policy attachment to the discussion.
Right.
If it's not, then you create the public policy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we used to go to various public bodies meetings and try to confront, at that time was an all-white board, you know, they'd always make the statement somewhere during the meeting, well, if you all upset about how we doing things, you ought to run for something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, now these are the same folk that's setting up the barriers, but then they're giving us the solution to the problems in our community by running. Now, obviously, in most communities, the barriers in my day were difficult. They didn't often notice the times the office would be open. Right. There were people still trying to get people to interpret the Constitution. You know, how many bubbles in a bar of soap, those kinds of things.
Yeah, count the jelly beans in the jar.
Absolutely,
that kind of thing.
By looking at them.
Right.
Yeah, so those barriers were still there, but thank goodness we had a federal government. And the federal government was the backstop to some of the state and local barriers that were put up for people like me. The majority of people in my community were registered by federal registers, which was permitted under the Voting Rights Act. And federal registrars were actually people who just worked for the federal government. So,
but they were there to watch, look, and listen.
They observed the election,
Yeah.
but they actually registered people to vote. And the law said if you registered federally, nobody could take your name off the book. And so down the line, we had that battle after we put people on, because somebody would go in and say, well, John Smith, we took him off because we don't think he lives in the community. The law said you can't take him off.
Yeah.
And so we fought a lot of things, but public engagement, public discussion.
I mean, it's a different set of barriers now
Oh, yeah.
than what you experienced when you were young.
Right.
But we have the same challenge, which is getting people to feel like their voice matters, like it's worth their time to show up at a
absolutely.
meeting or to even
Oh,
or to
absolutely.
vote.
You know,
Yeah.
one of the things we try to do in my congressional office is it's nice to call the congressman and register your complaint. But, you know, we're kind of at the end of the complaint process. You know, you can't say, I can't get the city to do anything.
Right.
And then when you say, okay, who did you talk to? Well, I call and I talk to somebody. Do you know their name? You know, so you gotta try to document the problem.
Right.
And so part of it is citizenship education, that there's some personal responsibility you have to do when you engage in government. That's only so you can make sure that government is doing what it should.
Right.
And I'd be one of the first people to say that there are so many things that government could do for the people who help pay their taxes, pay their salaries, that they don't do. And that bothers me because they're there because we've set up a financing system to support federal and state and local employment. And in return, the expectation is, you know, they'll do a good job.
But you got to make them do it.
Oh, no question.
You know, that's always the thing is that officials will often say, well, you know, I want to be with you, but you got to make me, you know, by organizing and creating the political support.
Oh, yeah.
For what you want.
And you know, so much of my getting elected was about getting a community to have the confidence that if they register and vote, that their vote mattered, would be counted. And so even those first few elections I went through, every election, I had to go to court.
So I want to ask you about that, because I want to ask you, how did that feel? Here you are, finally, you know, getting the right to vote, being able to then build a coalition that delivered you an election.
Right.
And then the powers that be wanted to nullify that,
Yeah.
wanted to not recognize that. You had to go to court, and then when you won, some of them still would not recognize you.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel at the time?
Yeah, well, now, as you know, I've been a lifelong citizen of this community. I've been a member of my little church my whole life.
Yeah.
I was a paper boy. I was a member of the 4-H club. You know, I did what young boys in the community do. Went to school, organized Little League baseball teams when I got back. You know, just wanting to be a part of the community to make it better. But so I ran at a time where I was the only candidate on the ballot that had a college degree. And there were still people in the community saying, well, I don't know if Bennie's qualified for the job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
I beat a mayor, well, that's a little bit later, but
But still, you were running into this resistance after you became mayor.
Yeah.
I mean, this was not an isolated thing that just happened in 1969.
Right.
It seems like you kept
But 4 years later, when I ran for mayor, you know, they said, well, what do you know about running a town? Well, I think I can read and write, and I can figure out what we need to do. But even at that,
and you had more qualifications than anybody else.
yeah, just
that
based
would have
on
been
that
running.
and the experience, and
Right.
and so what I wanted to show was that this community, although it had been divided for too long, when you choose your leaders, you should unify after the election and go forward. But like I say, every time we had an election, it was contested. And so in America, you know, you either settle your differences at the ballot box or you go to court and settle their differences, and that should be the final arbiter of who won and who lost.
Right.
Fast forward, January 6th taught me a different, you know, 50 years later,
Right.
I found out there was that ugly head is raising itself again. But at all points, we wanted to follow the law. So we'd have voter education classes. We'd have candidate recruitment and education classes. And I can remember the first time I went to my city council meeting, the one suit I owned, I put it on, got my little briefcase, and I'm going to sit on the board of aldermen in my hometown.
Right.
And the clerk said at the first meeting, so I tell you right now, I'm not going to do anything you all say.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, this the clerk, not the mayor.
Yeah, this guy thought he could do this.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that kind of set the tone, that it really didn't matter that the election was over. There are some people who just can't turn it loose. And so that's been part of that struggle all along.
So I want to fast forward the struggle and have you reflect back now. It's 50 years or almost 50 years since some of these things you've experienced. How do you look back on that period now with what's happened since? What do you think about those days, and how do you relate them to what you're seeing now in politics?
Well, I think so much of what happens in this country now is with the advent of social media and people pushing out absolute lies on the platforms. And there are some people who become convinced that what they read online is the truth.
Right.
They don't really look at the source or anything like that. And so much of what my work with the January 6th committee showed is that that radicalization, that misunderstanding, that miseducation is being handled in record numbers, and it's a clear and present danger to our democracy. Because when you say, make America great again, I'm trying to say, well, I think it's still right now the greatest country.
What again do you want to go back to? Is sort of a question
that's been a
me.
fundamental challenge that for me is now the separate and unequal Bolton, Mississippi that I grew up in. I don't want to go back there because the local system did not want to change. You can go to the community now. There's a new city hall, there's a new fire station, there's trained law enforcement, there's running water and sewage available to all citizens, new schools.
So progress has been made.
That's right. So you mean I want to go back behind that progress and say that that's making it great again? But it's a dog whistle that's being put out there by various people, former President Trump to be exact, and being amplified online to the point that it became dangerous. And it manifested itself on January 6th with him inviting people to come to Washington and basically in the tweet saying it's going to be wild.
Right.
The average person in America didn't have any idea what January 6th was other than a day in January.
Right.
And so he amplified it and weaponized the whole effort that day. There were, a lot of people who thought they were following his direction and that if this country would be saved, it would be something like that. And so even in the greatest country in the world, we have to be custodians of our democracy, and we have to make sure that it does not get hijacked by people who don't have the interests of this country at heart.
So with this in mind, and here, we're here in the context of Black History Month, I want you to reflect, if you would, on the efforts of African Americans to take political power, to gain political power in this country. A lot has changed. How do you feel about the situation now, though, in these circumstances? Are there some things that that have, well, I'm not saying they haven't changed, but we've got a new set of variables, a new set of, you talked about social media, you talked about these forces that are empowering people with an agenda to take us back to some time. How is that affecting the ability of African Americans to retain political power and gain more political power?
Well, first of all, I see that people in the black community fundamentally believe in the rule of law. They believe that if you are going to change things, then you're going to have to do it within the framework prescribed by law. So if voting is that framework, then you participate. Now, there are bad people who I wouldn't be caught in a room with because they're bad people.
Right.
And I think in other communities you have the same kind of situation. But when I find in talking to people, fundamentally, the rule of law is a standard. That whatever the law prescribes, that's what we'll do. If the law saying picking your leaders, you have to be a registered voter, and you can vote for the candidate of your choice. I see that in the black community of more value than I've seen, to be honest with you, in the white community, because racial bloc voting in the white community is more prevalent than it is in the black community. Black people have been voting for white candidates all their life.
Sure.
But many in the white community have never voted for a black person. And so there's still learning to be acquired. And for me, as somebody who grew up in a community, who still, as being as fortunate as I am, I'm still viewed by the system in my state as a radical. Now, you say, now, you've been married to the same woman for 54 years. Your daughter lives across the street. You got 2 grandkids and a dog, okay? So now, what in the world could make you a dangerous person?
Right.
Well, it's because I have that mind to want to make things better for everybody in the community. And the system, in many instances, does not. I was told that if you run for Congress, the kiss of death was to have organized labor and Jesse Jackson campaign for you. So you can't win. I'm saying, wait now. Here's a guy who ran for president, made a damn good opportunity, and some of the best paying jobs that I know of in America are union jobs.
Sure.
The 2 best jobs in my hometown was either for the railroad or the post office. And they both were union jobs.
Yeah.
And so you're going to tell me that if those people like that endorse you, the system.
It's all over for you.
Oh yeah, kiss of death.
Let me turn to sort of turn the conversation back toward making government work, because we talked about engagement and how people need to be engaged between elections and feel like their voice matters. You have served on a number of congressional committees. You've led congressional committees and really been an advocate of oversight and a champion of congressional oversight. So I want to ask you about some of that. You've chaired and been ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee for quite a number of years. And just in the last couple of years when you were chair, you mounted several really important investigations. Investigation looking into the hacking of the Colonial Pipeline. You looked at the threats after January 6th of terrorists, who could threaten our democracy and our system. You looked at white supremacists who were threatening HBCUs and black churches. Do you have just do you want to talk a little bit about some of your favorite investigations, or maybe a hearing or two that really made a difference in your mind?
Well, first of all, oversight in Congress or oversight in the state legislature, anything, the public within reason has a right to know. The public within reason should know. And only in a classified setting or something like that should information be withheld. Right. And so for Bennie Thompson, his philosophy has been, look, if it happened and we have some authority to look into it, then the public has a right to know what results came from that hearing or that incident. So the Colonial Pipeline, for instance, when eastern half of the United States, all of a sudden gas went from $2.50 a gallon to $5 a gallon, and higher in other regions. You know, the cyber aspect of that pipeline security, which is under Homeland Security, I mean, we have to get to the root cause.
You got to get to the heart of the matter.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And so it's not that, oh, well, this is this big company and, you know, they know a lot of people. Oversight is about getting the truth of whatever that situation that occurred. And so in that situation and in a number of other situations, we've always wanted truth to be the disinfectant in the discussion.
Right.
And so we did a lot of oversight on Katrina, which was one of the largest disasters that we ever had in this country. And so we found a number of flaws that occurred, missteps. The Red Cross. Normally people thought a lot of the Red Cross,
right.
And they fixed their act. They didn't have many black volunteers, so when Katrina hit, the volunteers that went to New Orleans was afraid to go to the 9th Ward, because that's where the black people live. So that's not how you respond to a disaster for American citizens. You go where the disaster occurs.
Right.
So we had to fix that. We had to fix every after action review of every disaster that we've had in this country, because of the oversight, has made FEMA more nimble, more responsible, so that when the next incident occurs, they're responsible. So oversight's important, and people should not take offense to oversight. They should welcome it, because the worst response to oversight that I can imagine is, oh, but we've always done it this way. Worst answer you can possibly give.
Right.
Because every system should be available for review. Every system should be available for improvement.
Right.
And it's only the process of oversight do you get the notion that, you know, there are better ways. One of the things we say in the country, you know, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Right. Well, one of the things I always think about in oversight is government is, you know, everything in modern society is very complex, and government has many pieces to it. But part of the mission of oversight is to still hold accountable results, you know, because a lot of people in it, you know, in the administrative state can say, well, you know, there's all these procedures and rules and we're following the rules. But if somebody in an oversight hearing is saying, but wait a minute, this law is supposed to accomplish this end and it's not being accomplished, what are we going to do about that? And I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and this notion that government functions for its people, and government should not become so defensive
right.
that it doesn't deliver for the people. And so leaders have to constantly review policies and procedures.
And follow up, and it's not done and dusted when you pass the law, right?
Yeah. Oh no.
You got to keep going
And
respond.
you have to review it.
Right.
And again, if you let them become stale, then you fail the system. The system says whatever policies we put in place, periodically we have to review to see if we are accomplishing the goals and objectives that we are supposed to. And so people in government and other things get comfortable. And
so your job to make sure they don't get too comfortable.
yeah, and you know, Woodrow Wilson said, if you ever want to make enemies, try to change something.
Right.
I mean, you know, and you don't have to go from daylight to dark. You know, you can go from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Somebody's real been out of shape over that 1 hour.
Right.
But from my perspective, and I've historically believed that there's a place for government, there's a place for oversight, because oversight is the validator for either it's working or it's not.
Right. It's what it creates the legitimacy. You know, again, giving people a reason to participate if they believe that there's somebody,
Yeah.
kind of a cop on the beat, if you will, somebody that's paying attention to the outcomes.
See,
Yeah.
and one of the philosophies that I have is that if somebody asks me to ask the IG or GAO to look into a situation, I'll do it.
Right.
I mean, because it's if nothing's wrong, then this review will tell you nothing's wrong.
Right. There's no harm in looking.
That's right.
Right. Let me move us over to something I know everybody wants to hear your comments about, and that's obviously the January 6th committee. And I want to start out by just asking you about the dynamic on the committee, because this was seen as a sort of committee of bosses. You know, there were so many very prominent members in addition to you. You had chairs of committees. You had obviously the vice chair being someone who was very prominent in the Republican caucus. And yet you seemed very well attuned to leading that committee. Why was that? What allowed you to feel so comfortable and able to lead this group?
Well, I felt like our entire group loved America. I felt that our entire group wanted us as a committee to get to the facts and circumstances around what occurred. And they were not challenged or inhibited, or as one told me, they were not shrieking violence. And so we called it like we saw it. I nominated, I selected Liz Cheney to be my vice chair. Before that formulation of the select committee, I probably hadn't talked to Liz twice since she or I have been in Congress. And politically, I think we were what you call polar opposites in philosophy.
But you built a relationship.
Built a relationship, and we both loved America. And what we saw on January 6th is not the America that we want it to be. And so we joined forces, put a good staff together, and tasked them with going out and getting the facts and bringing them to us. You know, for 18 odd months, we put in a lot of time. And, you know, I get a chance to go around and tell our story. But I'm also saying to you and this audience, you know, we came really close as a country to losing it. My wife called me on January 6th. I was at the Capitol. I wasn't privy to what was going on the outside till she made that call. And, you know, I've since, given the work that we've done, you know, to attack the Capitol of the United States of America, you know, that beacon on the hill that we all so proud of, and you want to hang the vice president, you know, you want to kill.
What could have motivated people to do that?
Well, and so so part of our oversight in this whole process, we interviewed over 1,000 witnesses and a couple of million exhibits we collected, and so I think our report and the subsequent footnotes and documentation determines that from an oversight perspective, our president caused a lot of that to happen. And that's so unfortunate because you commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
And why promote something that's inaccurate just because you lost an election? But
Let me ask about the election, because you were quoted as saying that the insurrection was fundamentally about voting rights. Can you expand on what you mean by that?
Well, the perception that somehow fraud occurred, somehow that people got elected because of that fraud and that it wasn't right. Well, we found in our collection of information very little instances of fraud. There were over 60 cases filed in court that were lost by those challenges. And again, you know, as I said, you know, we normally settle our differences at the ballot box. If you disagree, you can get the recounts going, then you go to court. But after you go to court, normally you'd say, well, I lost.
Yeah,
but
we're done.
That's right. I'll see you at the next election.
Right. And
So I'll go back, kind of do my own oversight
right.
as to what went wrong, and I'll get ready for the next election.
Mm-hmm.
That's what, you know, this democracy is all about, making sure that the wishes of the people are being heard.
Mm.
And that's how we select our leaders. Right. That's who they want. But don't try to market it as right. somehow that it was stolen. And so I you know, I have to look at social media. I have to look at some of the networks who promoted things that was absolutely untrue.
Yeah.
That Dominion voting case
right.
is instructive. Commentators on Fox Network knew that what they were saying was not true, but they kept saying it. And you know, in the country, they say, you know, if you tell a lie long enough, somebody's going to believe it.
It takes hold with a lot of people. I want to quote you on something, another quote that I found really, really interesting. You said, quote, "I want as an African American to be able to say to the world that I helped stabilize our government when insurrectionists tried to take over," unquote. Why is it particularly important to you as an African American leader to be able to say that?
Well, now, you got to understand, my foreparents came to this country in the belly of a ship as a slave, right. Had no rights, and over time, we've gained some of those rights. The building that we defended on January 6th was built by slave labor. And so here you got somebody whose daddy didn't have the opportunity to vote, whose state is notorious for denying African Americans the right to vote without the federal government help. And now somebody like me chairing that committee, which people are saying will be one of the more the best hearings that we've had, and they're trying to compare it to Watergate or some of the other things. But what I saw, being a Black American, that the uniqueness of it, you know, I was the only person, Black person on the panel to chair it. I thank Speaker Pelosi for giving me that privilege to do it. But I also look at the histories I share with you, and and it's from whence I came, to where I am now. I think that's the signal to boys and girls all over the country that you don't have to accept your status in life just because who you are. You just strive to be better. Now, I still have the challenges that a lot of other black people have. I recognize that, every so often, I get checked by the system. Best thing I can tell you is one morning, I've been in the same building that I live in here in Washington for almost 30 years. And so this particular morning, I wanted to go out, get a cup of coffee. And so when I came back in, get to the building, somebody of a different color than me tried to close the door in my face. And I said, excuse me, I don't know you. I said, but I don't know you. But the reaction was, he was a black guy.
Right.
I must be a criminal if I stay in this building.
Right, you have no business there otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've been there almost 30 years.
Yeah.
So, some of those.
So these realities.
Those subtleties still remind
right.
me that we have
ways to
along.
go.
That's right. But I don't take it negatively. I take it as a fact of reality and how we have to work at making things better.
I want to ask you about another thing I think that actually we sort of have in common. I'm a former state legislator from Michigan, and I was the vice chair of the Oversight Committee during the Flint water crisis.
Okay.
And I saw firsthand what happens when the government doesn't do oversight, when the government doesn't look after the policies it creates on the ground. It doesn't listen to the people who are crying out and saying, there's something fundamentally wrong here. And I wanted to ask you about what you think maybe the January 6th committee has taught us about using technology and using ways to reach out to the public. Because one way I think oversight can really make a difference on these issues that we aren't making progress or need to make a lot of more progress on is to try and engage people and give them an opportunity to be part of oversight, in a way to democratize oversight. Do you think some of the things that the January 6th committee did might point the way toward, getting more folks, regular folks, into the process?
Yeah, we took great pride at how we presented a lot of our work in our public hearings.
Yeah.
But we also said at the end of the public hearings, if there's anybody who disagreed with what we presented, we welcome your input, and if we deem your input important, we will invite you in under oath to share that information. But you can't just come in and talk crazy,
right,
and think that's the truth.
Right.
Because if you come in under oath and we find out that you're lying to us, we're going to charge you with perjury.
Right.
Because at the end, oversight also has to have the aura of truth associated with it, or it's no good.
Right. We have to be pursuing it. We know we don't have a handle entirely on what's true, but we're trying to get there. I wanted to ask you about Jackson and the water crisis. That's what I meant when I said, coming from Michigan, we've had a terrible water crisis. I know you've suffered something terrible in Jackson.
What we found with Jackson, and unfortunately, Jackson is Flint once removed.
Right.
We found out that state and local officials failed their job. We found where state of Mississippi did not provide resources necessary to keep that system functioning. But we also found the local owner of the system failed to have the adequate number of operators on site, failed to do the sampling that's required, failed to do the necessary infiltration fixing, that any water system is required to meet certain standards.
So your investigation, I know you launched an investigation last fall,
Yeah.
has already uncovered a
All of
lot
that.
of these facts.
Oh, absolutely.
What is the status now? Is it going to continue now in the new, with new leadership here in the,
Well,
in the
what
House?
we were able to do with the help of the Biden administration, and in the midst of this, we had a disaster declaration. So we secured $600 million to start the process of restoring safe drinking water to the citizens of the largest city in the state of Mississippi. Now that will probably take 4 to 5 years to complete. The system, for all intensive purposes, was on life support. And so now, just like Flint, it's taken the federal government in its role under the various safe drinking water acts and what have you to do it. But Jackson's water was already in a consent decree, and they were in violation of a consent decree already.
Do you see this, Congressman Thompson, as sort of a new terrain in the civil rights movement? I mean, infrastructure, equity around public services. I know you've always fought to make sure that African American citizens were getting the same services and the same infrastructure as white citizens.
Yeah. Well,
how do you see this working now, and what has oversight got to do in order to make sure that that happens?
Well, there's a case that came out of Shaw, Mississippi in the 70s, which was a municipal equalization suit. And that the court said that you can't discriminate against the citizens of your city based on race, color, or religion. And so that now has become part of the public policy discussion on oversight into other areas. In our infrastructure and transportation package, we started looking at how interstate highways were designed. And we found in the majority of instances, when we put our interstate highways systems in place, they displaced low, moderate, and minority communities disproportionately to other communities.
In Detroit, there is an effort, actually now finally funded, to undo some of that damage by taking out a freeway called 375, which was built during that very same time and destroyed a black neighborhood, two black neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I don't think, unfortunately, those neighborhoods will not come back as in the form that they were, but it's a recognition that terrible mistakes were made, and we can't repeat those mistakes. We have to try to remedy.
Yeah, and so what I've seen in some of that is in the areas where they did go into other communities, they put sound barriers up.
Yeah.
So that you really didn't know there was an interstate going through the community because you couldn't hear the vehicles. Right. I mean, there were mitigating things that could have gone on in some of those communities. They didn't do it. They didn't negotiate with the local person who had the cleaners in the community to help relocate that business. They just said, look, here's what we're going to pay you for it. If you don't take it, we're going to eminent domain your property. And so you destroyed a sound economic community with interstate highway systems. So those are some of the restorative things that oversight will tell us we have to do. So once you start that process, you have to have a commitment that after you find the facts, you then have to come with supporting the solutions. Now, the solutions might be hard, and in some instances, almost impossible to redo. But you have to make the effort once you find out. Right. For instance, when I was at Jackson State University, I had to, as a graduate student, I had to go to a private white college's library because I didn't have the books at my state university. So I ended up having to sue the state of Mississippi because there was a separate system for black kids than white. But it took us 27 years of litigation, and we won $500 million in a settlement to just help the black colleges to come up to a certain standard.
Right.
Well, it was the oversight that went into that lawsuit where we showed difference in salaries, different in buildings, different in athletics. I mean, just everything.
Right.
But the state of Mississippi was still trying to defend what the facts said, that you got a system. So we finally got a federal court to say, "Hold, time out. We've been at this too long." And so that oversight that we did on our higher education system, you know, out of it, we got a school of engineering for Jackson State. We got a school of public health for Jackson State. But that was litigation, but it came out of the oversight that we had in the process. So oversight is the elixir for making things better.
Solving problems, really.
Oh, absolutely.
It may not happen right away, but you got to have those facts in front of you in order to solve
That's
those
right.
problems.
And as a black American, in this Black History Month we are celebrating, you know, I take umbrage to this great country of ours. Is it perfect? No. Is there another country that is? No. But I take the fact that my grandchildren will have a better opportunity to be the best that they can be in a country where oversight is accepted as one of those tenets for making sure that we get it right. And so I don't push back on having anything reviewed because that's how you validate.
That's the conversation we should be having with the people, right? What are the facts? Share them with the public, and let the public help us decide, you know, in the next election or what have you, what we should do.
Yeah, like I said, we can you imagine in this country that a homeless person and a billionaire on election day, they're equals?
Right.
I mean, that it doesn't get any better than that.
Right.
And so, you know, that homeless person can walk out of the polling precinct and go right back under his bridge or whatever, and that billionaire can go to his house on the hill. But that's who we are,
Right.
As Americans. But we don't deny either individual that right to help in choosing our leaders.
Right.
And that's our greatness.
Let me wrap this up. I know we're about to run out of time, but I want to ask you about the future. And I want to get to that. I want to quote one of your colleagues who served with you on the January 6th committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin. So this is what he said. He said, talking about the insurrection, he said, "This was a convergence of a mob riot with a white nationalist violent insurrection and an inside political coup. Bennie Thompson has life experience dealing with all of those things. He understands in a deeper way the dynamics of both normal and abnormal politics," unquote. What are your thoughts about the future of our country, the future of our democracy? Did your experience leading the January 6th committee make you more optimistic or less optimistic about the future of our politics? Are we going to have abnormal politics? Is it going to get more abnormal? What has this whole experience taught you?
Well, I'm a passionate believer in the United States of America for a number of reasons. One is I saw, based on my work on the committee, how close we came to losing it all.
Right.
And if we had, God forbid, lost it, I don't know what we would have had to replace it. We have had a held over president who somehow has declared martial law and made himself president for God knows how long. That's a decision that we should never have put before the good people in this country. The second challenge that I have as a person who's been involved in government is to convince people that don't tune it out.
Right.
You got to stay engaged. When you disengage, then you see the discussion to people who may or may not have your interests at heart.
Right.
So you got to stay engaged. And again, those people, insurrectionists who came to Washington and invaded the Capitol, desecrated it, did all kind of bad things, I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Can you imagine me trying to tell my 17-year-old grandson, says, son, that's the way I want you to act when you disagree with an election. That's not who we are.
Right.
But misled, misguided individuals.
Well, that city clerk 50 years ago who thought he didn't have to work with you was misled and misguided. And unfortunately, because of the media environment and the other things, we've got a large group of people who are similarly misguided.
Well, and there are some people, as we speak on this program, who are saying that they still believe the election was stolen. And so when you say, okay, we want you to bring proof to us, and we look at it, and again, we tried to find it. We talked to Democratic election officials, we talked to Republican election officials, and almost to every person. They said, we didn't find any impropriety. People lost, and we stand behind it. And so the unfortunate thing is that, there's no accountability for lying. You just keep lying. And what I've seen in that instance that allows me to kind of remain hopeful is that what I saw in the last elections, when this so-called red wave was going to occur, I think it was the manner in which we presented the facts and circumstances around January 6th. I think there were a group of people who said, we can't let the people who are wanting to take over this country succeed. And so I think we were fortunate, even though on the Democratic side, we lost the House, but we didn't lose it to the numbers that people had predicted. And again, Bennie Thompson doesn't like being in a minority in this body, but I'm able to participate. I accept the fact that Republicans this cycle around are leading the House of Representatives, and Democrats are in the minority. I'm not trying to play sore loser, because I'm trying to demonstrate to the world that this great country of ours and how we select our leaders is what keeps us great.
Right.
And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you never give up.
Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up our conversation. I want to thank you, Congressman Thompson, for engaging me today and engaging our audience with your wonderful career and your perspective as an African-American leader who has really made a difference in public life and in the last couple of years in engaging all of us in some of the most historic oversight issues we've ever seen. And so thank you. Thank you for spending time with me. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, and I've enjoyed sharing it with you.
Thanks.
Thank you.